Then let's start with a word of prayer. Dear God, I ask you for guidance during the study. Help me to present and help us all to understand what you want to teach us. Help us to find clarity on our questions and to find unity in the movement regarding this important topic of the Sunday law. Be with us and give us wisdom and understanding. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. As you might know, my main topic is Islam, and according to my understanding, it is connected to the Sunday law waymark. I believe that the institution of the USA commits a sin at the National Sunday law waymark. They fail their test and suffer shipwreck, which is their close of probation and judgment. In connection to that, we should see the third woe as a scourge against the army of Rome for their apostasy. We will look first in this first presentation at the sin and in the next presentation at the scourge. To make it clear, I'm talking about the institution, not about the individuals. The institution is shipwrecked at the National Sunday law waymark. This is their close of probation. That means their test begins before this waymark. The test is beginning in 2021, which is Exeter, or the midnight cry for the institution. The test for the institution, in my opinion, is over now, and I suggest that the close of probation of the institution is January 2025. We should not mix it up with the national Sunday law and with the worldwide Sunday law waymarks. The tests are after these waymarks. They are still future and they are for the individuals. But the test for the institution was before. They have had their close of probation already. Close of probation is the closed door, shipwreck, or judgment for the institution. So my study is related to this waymark here on the line of the institution. I believe that the waymarks are whole years. Depending on the story, there are different dates within that year. The third woe should be seen in the year of shipwreck of the institution as a scourge for their apostasy, for their failure, for not passing the test. I think the problem that people have with seeing Islam at the Sunday law is that neither the Bible nor Ellen White do give us any information about the third woe. We don't have any of our familiar lines that show an event at the Sunday law. It's like hidden truth. But we have Acts 27, and I believe we have to combine it with Acts 28. We see the east wind not only at 9/11, but also at the Sunday law. It will empower the second and third angels' messages and confirm the method once again. What I wanted to show with my application of Acts 27 at the International Camp Meeting was that we see the same symbols at 9/11 and at the Sunday law. We see symbols of judgment. I think many people could not see this application to be correct because Elder Tess made a different application of this line already. I don't reject Elder Tess' application, neither do I believe that I contradict her. So she placed the third ship of Acts 27, of Acts 28, between close of probation and the second advent. She placed it here. She combines both ships of Alexandria as a progressive line. But she said that in our current dispensation, which was 2021 when she made that presentation, she said we won't have a clear understanding of how the dispensation between close of probation and second advent will look like. So she said, and I quote her, What I want to do is lay out a structure without attempting to make any serious application. So what I'm just doing is that I take all 3 separate ships as separate lines and placing them on top of each other. One ship stands for one line of the institution. 1798 is Alexandria, the beginning of the institutions. 1989 is Melita because it means honey, which is a symbol for the little book opened at the time of the end. 2001 is Syracuse because it is the tarrying time where Paul tarried. 2021 is Regium because it means breach. And I believe that this is a symbol for January 6, 2021, when the democratic institution was damaged. In Acts 27, this is the moment when the ship almost shipwrecked, but then they cast 4 anchors and were therefore able to delay the shipwreck. On January 6, 2021, democracy was almost overturned. Trump and his followers did not accept that they had lost the election and wanted Vice President Mike Pence to not certify the election outcome, to go against the votes of the people, to silence the voice of the people. It was a coup attempt. At that moment, the institution was strong enough to survive, but it received first breaches. That's why I would mark Regium, which means breach, at 2021. Elder Tess said in 2022 that January 6 is part of the Exeter waymark of 2021 on the line of the 144,000. She said that we have to see January 6 as a prophetically significant event, that it has the same notoriety as 9/11. In different ways, both finally and fundamentally changed the US. What has made January 6 significant are what Donald Trump, the Republican Party, and the states since January 6 have done with that event and with voting rights. January 6 provides a window in America's future because of what has been done with its sins. So 4 years later, on the day, on January 6, 2025, the person that almost destroyed democracy on January 6, 2021, was certified to be president again. On January 20, 2025, the first days when he was in office, he pardoned the rioters of January 6, and he began purging the FBI and other federal services from all who investigated against him because of January 6. So 2021 and 2025 is bookended. It is the history reversed. As Elder Tess had said, January 6 was a window into the future. It was Exeter. It's a whole story that can be traced until the climax in January 2025. Because of January 6, there was an impeachment, several lawsuits, and a Supreme Court decision. Despite of all what he did, he was allowed to run as president again. He was nominated by his party. The party should have been the gatekeeper to keep extremists out, but they voted him in at the RNC in July. Then there was the election, then the Electoral College meeting in December, and finally the certification in January. None of these democratic processes that should actually prevent an extremist to come to power worked. He came through all of these gatekeepers. The certification would have been the final moment when objections could have been made, but when Kamala Harris certified him without any objection by the Congress, it was done. On January 20, on day 1, as he promised, he immediately began his work acting like a dictator. issuing a flood of undemocratic, unequal decrees and flooding the zone. So I believe that on January 2025, the institution of the USA has committed their biggest sin, finally shipwrecking democracy. In 2024, it was prepared, and in 2025, it was implemented. It's not the voters who committed the sin, but the institution, the parties, and the democratic processes that did not function as gatekeeper anymore. It is not about the individuals at this waymark, but about the institution. The democratic institution received the mark of the beast because shipwreck is close of probation for the institution. It's still a democracy on the paper, but the extremist is in power now. The executive, legislative, and judicial branches are all in his hands, officially since January 20. So in my understanding, the institution is speaking as a dragon. It looks like a lamb, it looks like democracy, but it is speaking as a dragon. Another reason why I would place Regium at 2021 is because we have the south wind here. In Acts 28, verse 13, we have the south wind. And in Acts 27, at 1989, we have the south wind. And at the next waymark, 2001, we have the east wind. So in 1989, it is the fall of the Soviet Union, which is good for the USA. And in 2021, we have the fall of Russia, which is also good for the USA. So we have the south wind at both waymarks. And we have not in verse 14 of Acts 28, the east wind, but we know it's a rule of nature. Paul knew that it is a repeating pattern that after the south wind follows the east wind. So I would say that at the next waymark, we have the east wind because it's just a repeating pattern. In Luke 12:55, we can read that after the south, I read verse 55, and when ye see the south wind blow, ye say, there will be heat, and it cometh to pass. And the word heat in Strong's means euros, a very dry, hot east wind, scorching and drying up everything. So even if you don't accept my application of Acts 28 to be correct, I think we can surely say that we saw the south wind in 1989 and we saw the south wind in 2021. And when we saw the east wind after 1989, then we should see the east wind also after 2021. And the next waymark is just the Sunday law waymark. So we continue in Acts 28. The final waymark is Puteoli. This is the end of the journey of the ship. The ship arrives at this point. The institution ends at the Sunday law, as we saw in Acts 27. And therefore, I believe Puteoli is symbolizing the Sunday law as well. So Puteoli means sulfurous spring. And the city is placed on sulfurous springs next to a volcano in Italy. Sulfur is found in the King James Bible under the antique word brimstone. It is basically a synonym. The word brimstone is found in several places in the Bible, and it is connected to judgment. It points to the final judgment, to the close of probation. But in Revelation 9, verse 17 to 18, brimstone is part of the symbols for Islam for the second woe for the Ottoman Empire. So for us, the second woe is a parable for the third woe, the spiritual Ottoman Empire. At Puteoli, at the Sunday law waymark, we have brimstone or sulfur as a symbol for judgment and Islam. At Puteoli, we see the east wind because we saw the south wind in the previous waymark. And this means we have two witnesses for Islam at the Sandelo waymark, brimstone and east wind. And shipwreck is judgment, and judgment is a scourge, and a scourge becomes because of an apostasy. So we have to see a sin or an apostasy at this waymark. Sandelo is the end of the glorious land, and this, in my mind, is the sin. And the woes are the scourge. They don't yet kill the army of Rome, but they hurt it again, as they did already in 2001. Sulfur has also to do with the method of warfare, as Uriah Smith tells us. We will not read it for time, and this is also only a repetition of my ICM study. As I already said, we have the same symbols of 2001 also at the Sandelo. So in 2001, Syracuse, the city is next to a volcano, which is a symbol for judgment and scourge. And at Puteoli, the Sandelo waymark, this city is also next to a volcano, which is also a symbol for judgment and scourge. 2001, Paul tarried 3 days, and at the Sandelo, Puteoli, Paul tarried 7 days. So also two symbols, two times we have the tarrying time here. 2001, we have two rivers because the city of Syracuse lays at the river mouth of two rivers. And in Acts 27, we have two seas that meet at the Sandelo waymark. So also similar symbols. We have another connection between 2001 and the Sandelo because 2001 is a Boston and pointing to the Sandelo in the line of the 144,000. It is one dispensation. God is showing the end, the Sandelo, from the beginning, from 2001. I believe that the waymarks are a point, a special day, and also a period, which is the whole year. Example 1798, where we see different prophetic events in different months, but within that year, and all is the time of the end. The same example is 1989. Also a point, but also a period. And I would say also 2001 is the whole year that we have to consider. To understand this year, I would like to recommend to watch the first 10 minutes of Michael Moore's documentary Fahrenheit 9/11. It begins with the election of 2000 between Al Gore and George W. Bush. Michael Moore is showing how the Republicans did everything to make sure to win the election. They suppressed voters in a huge scale. With the brother of Bush, who was governor of Florida, there was a lot of corruption. The result of the election was so close that they had to do a recount, which changed the results in favor of Al Gore. But as it took too long, the Supreme Court decided that the recounting of Florida should be stopped and that Florida was won by the Republicans. This was a very controversial decision, and on January 6, 2001, the election result was to be certified. Several Congresspeople, especially Black Congresswomen, brought their objections, but no senator helped them to sign their objection. Therefore, the objections were not valid and the Congresspeople were silenced. So at the end, Bush was certified as president by the Vice President Al Gore. So he certified his own defeat, basically. Someone told me recently that there were 3 young lawyers that flew to Florida to assist the Bush team at this Supreme Court case. And these young lawyers were Amy Coney Barrett, John Roberts, and Brett Kavanaugh. And we know all of them are sitting in the Supreme Court today, which is another nice connection between 2001 and today. January 6, 2001 was a crucial day for the institution of the USA. They certified someone as president who did not rightfully win the election, as Michael Moore portrays it. Other people did extensive researches about this election and came to the same conclusion. For example, also an investigative journalist who is called Greg Palast. He did a great documentary about the history of voter suppression, and there it is also shown that the election of 2000 was definitely not fair and free. You can do your own research on this. Many people protested at the inauguration day because they felt that their voices had not been heard, and it is just all about voting. This is the most fundamental principle of democracy, letting the people decide who they want as their representatives. George W. Bush, in his first month in office, did a bad job, and he did not have much support. The country was very divided, and Bush had very low approval ratings. But then, a few months later, happened 9/11. After 9/11, it changed completely. The book, How Democracies Die, explains very good what a demagogue needs in order to consolidate his power. A national emergency as justification for anti-democratic measures. I read here only part of this quote. Crises are hard to predict, but their political consequences are not. They facilitate the concentration and very often abuse of power. Wars and terrorist attacks produce a rally round the flag effect in which public support for the government increases, often dramatically. In the aftermath of September 11, President Bush saw his approval ratings soar from 53%, which was very low, to 90%, the highest figure ever recorded by Gallup. So then I read the last sentence. The combination of a would-be authoritarian and a major crisis can therefore be deadly for democracy. So September 11 was really the turning point. It was the worst foreign attack in America. Michael Moore, in his documentary Fahrenheit 9/11, shows first the controversial election and the certification of George Bush, as I already have described it, and then he shows 9/11. It really looks like cause and effect as he portrays it. We could also say sin and scourge. At the certification of George Bush, the institution committed a big sin. I really recommend to rewatch the first 10 minutes of this documentary. 9/11 was the east wind hitting the ship of the institution. Why? Because the east wind is a scourge, and a scourge becomes of a sin. There must have been a sin before September 2001. And I believe it is the sin that is exposed in Fahrenheit 9/11. It's the sin of damaging democracy in January 2001. Bringing a president to power in an unfair election and without the clear majority of the voters. God uses the votes as a tool to punish Rome for their iniquities. We saw how the USA began to transfer from being the glorious land to becoming the Sunday Law movement. It began in 1979 with the moral majority, the Heritage Foundation, with Reagan, with George W. Bush. In my understanding, democracy gets overturned when the voices of the people are silenced. In other words, voter suppression. Then it is not we the people anymore. Then it is not the glorious land anymore. So the history of the voting rights should not be new to us. there had been already several studies done in the movement. For example, I want to read a quote of Justice Hugo Black, who said in 1964, "No right is more precious in a free country than that of having a voice in the election of those who make the laws under which as good citizens we must live. Other rights, even the most basic, are illusory if the right of vote is undermined." The right to vote is undermined. So the right to vote is the most precious thing in a free country. Justice Earl Warren said in 1964, "The right to vote freely for the candidate of one's choice is of the essence of a democratic society, and any restrictions on that right strike at the heart of representative government. Undoubtedly, the right of suffrage is a fundamental matter in a free and democratic society." So the free and fair election is a fundamental matter in a democracy. And what is so important to note is that the Republicans clearly don't want everybody to vote. They also admit this. Paul Weyrich said, he is the leader of the Heritage Foundation, and he said in 1980, "Wake up, folks. The campaign against democracy continues." This is an article which you can read. And he said, "Now many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome, good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't not want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact," he continued, "our leverage in the elections quite candidly goes up as the voting populace goes down." Weyrich's idea continues to animate the GOP today. So I want to repeat this last sentence. As a matter of fact, he said, "Our leverage in the elections quite candidly goes up as the voting populace goes down." So he does not want everybody to vote because he knows the Republicans would not win any election if anybody could vote. Peter Thiel said that we should not have women voting because they overwhelmingly vote for Democrats. Donald Trump was very open about what he was doing. He said that if you make it easier to vote, a Republican would never be elected again. He said they had things, levels of voting, that if you would ever agree to it, you would never have a Republican elected in this country again. Just read the last sentence here. This is from David Frum, who was a speech writer of George W. Bush. And he said, "If conservatives become convinced that they cannot win democratically, they will not abandon conservatism. They will reject democracy." I think that this shows very clearly the intention of the Republicans. In a dictatorship, it's a minority that is ruling over the majority. They even don't want the votes. They don't want to be voted by the people because then they can be voted out again. Then they depend on the will of the people. Across the USA, Republican lawmakers have introduced hundreds of bills in many states to restrict voter access. The Republican Party has no interest in appealing to a majority of Americans. Instead, they are doubling down on anti-democratic tactics so they can get a minority of votes but have a majority of power. So we have seen in the last years the biggest rollback on voting rights in decades. And it's extremely shocking to read how especially votes of women are suppressed in the last years. Now, back to the election of 2001. In my understanding of all of this, George W. Bush and the Republicans cheated themselves to power before and after this controversial election of 2000. This was their biggest sin, and at the certification of 2001, this sin was finally manifested. If we had more time, we could go through all the details and numbers. The most precious right in a free country is having a voice in the election. So it all begins by suppressing the votes of the people. Voting is having a voice. Everybody should have a voice. Everybody should be able to vote freely without any obstacle. And finally, every voice should be counted. Otherwise, it would not be equal, but patriarchal. This means for me pretending to be a lamb, a democracy, equality, but speaking as a dragon, which is dictatorship and patriarchy. You can read in Great Controversy, page 442 and 43, what Ellen White says about the lamb-like horns and the dragon voice. And I will not read it for time, but I think it makes it quite clear. The sin is controlling the consciences of the people. And I would interpret this as not letting them choose whom they want as their representatives, which is, in other words, suppressing the votes and ruling over them against their will. There is a book of Daniel Sieblatt and Levitsky, and it is called The Tyranny of the Minority. And I think the Republicans are the minority that are ruling over the majority now. As already explained, we had an election in 2000 that was not free and fair. And we had the election of 2016, which was also not free and fair. Hillary Clinton had won the popular vote, and she would have won also the presidency if there was not Russian interference. So we had the election of 2021, which was also not free and fair. Biden won, but nevertheless, there was cheating by the Republicans. This is why Trump did not believe the results and wanted to find the votes, as he said. It is not a conspiracy that they had problems with the votes counting computers and with the software, and there was definitely voter suppression. But the cheating was on the side of the Republicans and not on the side of the Democrats. The Republicans just failed and did not win the presidency at the end. That's why they tried to overturn the election result on January 6, 2021, which was the latest moment to not certify a president into power. The Republicans issued hundreds of laws that made it more difficult for minorities to vote. Why should they do this if they would win fairly and freely anyway? So I know we are in the Sunday law, and I know the world is sexist and patriarchy is ruling. I know that a woman could have never won the election at the Sunday law, but it's not because she does not get votes, but it's because the whole system is corrupted. The Republicans will never let a woman into power. It's the test of the institution, but not of the people, not of the voters. It's the institution that failed the test. And the test for the voters, for the people and the individuals comes later. This comes in the period of the loud cry, but it's not yet. Now we come to the election of 2024. The election of November 5 was exceptional because the results were so quickly published. It was such a clear win for Trump. He won 100% of the swing states. He won also clearly the popular vote. The Democrats and the media all agreed that it was a fair and free election. It looked like the people clearly wanted Trump and Harris had no chance. It looked like democracy was strong. In the movement, many said, yes, that's what we expected. At the Sunday law, the majority will vote for a man for Trump. A woman can never win this election. But to be honest with you, I don't believe that this is true. The Republicans win by cheating. We have examples from history. We know the hundreds of voter suppression laws. We know gerrymandering. We know how the Republicans manipulate and cheat. We know Project 2025 and their mandate for leadership. They took all precautions to guarantee that this election will be won. There are many reports and documentaries about especially Blacks and other groups, such as blue female students, that vote normally for the Democrats, and they are being suppressed from voting. And it got worse in the last years. The definition of a free and fair election from Wikipedia is: a free and fair election is defined as an election in which coercion is comparatively uncommon. A free and fair election involves political freedoms and fair processes leading up to the vote, a fair count of eligible voters who cast a ballot, a lack of electoral fraud or voter suppression, and acceptance of election results by all parties. So just with all the voter suppression laws, how can everybody say the election was fair when it even does not comply the definition of a fair and free election? When we look at the life and character of Trump, he wins by cheating all his life. Why should he win the biggest thing in his life by being fair and honest? It just can't be the case. The historian Heather Cox Richardson said in 2024, "You don't take away the drop boxes if you think that the people want the policies that you are advocating. You don't suppress the vote if you think what you are doing is popular. You don't try and shut people up if you think that they are going to be speaking for you. You don't go out there and lie about all your policies if you think people actually want them." The voter suppression covers several strategies. It is a strict voter ID requirement. It is a restriction in mail-in voting. They have polling place consolidations and closures. They limit early voting periods. They purge voter rolls. They criminalize the election of worker assistants. And there are barriers to voter registration. And this has, all of this has a disproportionate impact on minority communities. So in my understanding, a democracy is fallen when a minority of rich and influential people is ruling over the majority. This is dictatorship, even if it still looks like a democracy. And again, I don't deny that the majority is sexist and also that far too many like Trumpism. We see patriarchy gets more and more popular all over the world, but the majority does not want to be suppressed by an authoritarian leadership. The majority is still liberal and wants freedom. I think also the polls confirm that. There are journalists and organizations that are fighting since many years for fair and free elections, and they are analyzing the elections for years. They have a lot of experience in this. Their mission is to make sure that the people can trust in fair elections, which is the foundation of a functioning democracy. And these organizations have found serious concerns about the 2024 election. And after all that we learned about the Republicans and Trump, I have no doubt that what these organizations say is true. If you don't believe that, please do your own researches. I think even if we were not in the movement, but were just citizens who care about democracy and about our right to vote, even then we should stand up for truth. and not believe the lies of a demagogue. He is a cheater. We can check all the voter suppression measurements. By definition, the election was not free and fair. This is just a lie. These organizations found clear evidence. They wrote letters to Harris still in November to call for a recount in several swing states because of serious concerns. I will show here a few websites that are worth to check, but I will not read this all for time. This is an organization called smartelections.us. It is a non-partisan, non-profit organization who wants the public to have full confidence in election results. And they are listing here all the concerns which they have. For example, there were 200 bomb threats that disrupted the election. No one knows what happened when the election offices were evacuated because of these bomb threats. And the threats were only in democratic districts and came from Russian email accounts. Then another concern is that the software code of the voting machines was accessible for everyone. It was put online. There are known security breaches. The results in some states look not like a natural voting behavior, but like manipulated figures according to statistic experts who analyzed them. Here is a letter from a tech security expert, and he wrote that letter to Kamala Harris in November after the election. And he also had serious concerns and told her she should call for a recount and for an investigation. Then there's another organization which is called Election Truth Alliance. And this organization did extensive analysis of the election data, and they also found serious concerns about manipulation. It is worth to check their websites. Greg Palast is the investigative journalist who has experience in election investigation since 25 years. He did a really good documentary on the history of vote suppression and Jim Crow, and it is very well researched in my mind and worth to watch. Here is the link. And he said recently that according to his extensive researches about voter suppression, he is sure that Harris would have won the election just based on the numbers of votes that had been suppressed. He is listing here some key numbers, which I also will not read for time, but you can read it on your own. Of course, I won't be able to prove that all these numbers are correct. And also those organizations say that they have evidence, but they have no proof. And this is why they urgently call for investigations and for recounts, because they have really serious concerns. Greg Palast writes here on this article, it is America's nasty little secret. The nasty little secret of American democracy is that we don't count all the votes, nor let every citizen vote. The last paragraph, question, if these vote suppression laws, notorious example in Georgia, if these suppression laws had no effect on election outcomes, then why did GOP legislators fight so hard to pass these laws? The answer is clear on the Brennan Center's map of states that passed restrictive laws. It's pretty much Trump's victory map. And these are all these blue-colored states here on this map who passed restrictive voting laws between 2021 and 24. And all of these states, Trump has won in this election. The historian Heather Cox Richardson said in an interview on February 13 this year that, I read only the yellow marked thing. She said This is actually a real issue, and it bothers me that since 2021, for example, 34 states cut back on voting rights. And we look at 2024 and people say, well, you know, why didn't Black people show up for 2024? So why didn't they vote? And they don't put that together with the fact that we have had these voter suppression laws. And then she is also talking about the 2000 election, that also we had big voter suppression during this election. At the end, she says, we are getting rid of the idea of free and fair elections. People simply find they are unable to vote. Their votes get discounted. Their votes get challenged for one thing or another. I think we should take that serious. It should not come as a surprise to us that the election was definitely not fair, even if the Democrats and the media told us so. How can we believe that the Republicans played fairly this time and risk to lose the election when they even say things like the following, just as one example? Trump said on January 19, Elon Musk knows those computers better than anybody, all those computers, those vote counting computers. And we ended up winning Pennsylvania in a landslide. And then he said, thank you, Elon. So I believe that the Democrats should definitely have called for an investigation before January 6, 2025, before they certified the election results. Kamala Harris certified a demagogue into office. The Republican Party brought him up when they did not function as gatekeepers anymore, but Harris certified him at the final end. And at the end, the Democrats did not fight anymore. They surrendered to their fate and to the fate of the citizens. With that, in my mind, democracy was finally shipwrecked, even though it still looks like a democracy. I know it's not comparable to a real dictatorship like North Korea, for example, but it's also no functioning democracy anymore. The different gatekeepers did not prevent an extremist coming to power. I believe shipwreck is January 6 or 2025. Both dates are directly connected. And we saw what Trump did on day one, acting like a dictator, issuing a flood of decrees, even beginning a kind of persecution against equality, against DEI. Therefore, I believe 2025 is the year of the Sunday Law. This year is the beginning of the Sunday Law period. The Democrats were not able to say the election was rigged because they would have repeated his lie from 2020 or 2021. They assured back then that the vote counting systems worked well. So they could not admit now that there are definitely security breaches and that this should be investigated. Trump made it so clever. In spreading the narrative of a stolen election back then, he already made it so the Democrats could not use the same phrase 4 years later when the election was indeed stolen by him. It was a very clever strategy and it worked perfectly. Rule number 1 in our narcissist playbook is blame victims for what you yourself are guilty of. So he cheated in 2020 already, but he still lost. That's why he refused to believe the result. Imagine if he had lost in 2024 again. He was convicted of several crimes. Elon Musk said, we have to win or we go to jail. So they could not leave that outcome just to the voters. They had to take precautions beforehand. In conclusion, so what should we do now with this? We could say that we trust the mainstream media and not those independent journalists or organizations They are rather spreading a conspiracy of a rigged election, repeating the conspiracy that Trump spread 4 years earlier. But I would argue we are living in an information warfare. We know that the media is not so independent anymore. We already saw that Jeff Bezos changed the Washington Post. As I said, the Democrats will not admit that the election was not fair. There is no way back for them. Both parties failed completely. So we rely on those organizations who are doing a great and brave work to research and find the truth, to reveal what is really happening behind the curtains. You can do your own researches and read those sources. I will share my notes afterwards, and you can check these numbers. I think we should believe them instead of believing the lie of Trump. Daniel 11:23 says that the king of the north works deceitfully. This is just his character. So based on Acts 27 and 28, I was certain that Trump will not be elected by the majority of the people, but that he will be nevertheless certified as president. The majority would vote for Harris, but they would not let her into power. Instead, Trump will be certified. And I was saying that January 6, 2001 was pointing to January 6, 2025. A president was certified that was not elected in a fair and free election. Now, we had Trump as a clear winner already on November 5, but that is only because they made it so clever and prepared it in advance. They knew another insurrection and violence would not be successful because the Democrats were prepared for that. So the election result looked as if the majority wanted him, but this is a great deception in my opinion. By definition, it's a lie that the election was free and fair. The sin of the institution at the Sunday law of both parties was committed on January 6, 2025. And I want to clarify that I'm talking about the line of the institution here. It's their close of probation now. In this study, I wanted to show with the line of Acts 28 that we have the same characteristics at 2001 and at the Sunday law waymark. We see problematic election outcomes at both waymarks, and we see symbols of Islam at both waymarks. 2021 is Exeter for the Sunday law, and January 6, 2021 is a window to the future for America. It was almost shipwreck, but they dropped the 4 anchors and certified Biden and Harris into office. So they had 4 more years to fight for democracy. And also the Republicans had 4 years to prepare the takeover of the government. Voter suppression is the big fundamental sin of a democracy, of a democratic country, of the glorious land, which is pretending to uphold democracy while speaking as a dragon. Voter suppression is an attack against equality. I suggest that we see the manifestation of that sin in 2025 with the certification and inauguration of a dictator after an election that was not fair because of voter suppression. I wanted to show that the King of the North works deceitfully and does not win fairly. It's not the individuals who receive the mark of the beast at this first Sunday law waymark, but it is the institution. The democratic institution did not pass the test. July and November 2024 was Exeter for this, but January 2025 was the final shipwreck of the institution, which is my suggestion. In my next study, I would like to talk about the east wind as a scourge to the army of Rome. So this was my first study. If you have any question on that, please let me know. Otherwise, we would close in prayer.
Hi, Elena. I have a few questions for you.
Yes.
The first one is about the two rivers, that you've spoken about, that they're the same. I mean, we see the two rivers in 2001, and we see the two rivers, so virtually to 2025. Have
Mhm.
you defined what they are?
No, I have not, but
Yeah.
this would be quite interesting, I think.
hmm I was wondering if it has to do with the two stream of information. I don't know. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
no,
possibly.
possibly. hmm Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, what also would be interesting is the tarrying time, because in
Yes.
2001 Paul tarried 3 days, and in Puteoli at the son-in-law he tarried 7 days. That would be also interesting to investigate what it means.
Yes, definitely. Um, I have another question for you. I have a few. So I understand that the elections were not free and fair in November 5, which is the reason why Trump has won. Um, and you say that because they were not free and fair, actually that would be Harris that would be uh, nominated but not certified. But it goes in my mind. It's like could it couldn't be the way another way around, or could it? If it was a woman who have won, how prophecy would have been fulfilled if that would be the case. Do you understand what I
Um,
mean? Yeah.
yes, I think she could not have won because, as I said, the system or all these institutions just don't let a woman into power. So
hmm
I would say, so when we say we are now at the son-in-law, it is clear that a woman cannot be president at the son-in-law. But the reason for this is not because the majority would not want her, but because the whole system is corrupted and is patriarchal and does not let a woman come into power. So I really think it is correct to say a woman can never win at the son-in-law, but the reason for that should be defined as well. It shouldn't. The reason in my understanding, is not that the majority vote for a man, but that it is rigged and the Republicans have cheated, because it's not the test for the individuals. It's not the voting. The voting is not the test where they say, okay, I vote for a woman, then I have the seal of God, or I vote for a man, then I get the mark of the beast.
Yeah,
This is
sure.
not yet the test.
hmm
This comes later.
Yeah, okay, got it. Very clear. So, in this application that you've made about the free and fair election that were not free and fair, so you join what Pedro was presenting last year about
Mhm.
the third ship, which is the line that you've presented. Um, so my question is, w- how do you see July 18th then? What does it represent, or does it have any weight in that line, or do you place it somewhere else, or do you place it nowhere? Yeah, just want to know how you see July 18th.
I'm not sure about where exactly to place it. I know it is definitely an important day. I would
Mhm.
mark the whole year of 2024 as Exeter in the fractal from 2021 to 2025. I would mark 2024 as Exeter, definitely belong as in to this date as important events. Um, we have seen in July, um, Trump was crowned by the Republican Party, and this was a failure of the Conservative Party, who was stretching out their hand to fascism or extremism, and they should have been the gatekeepers. So it was definitely an important event. Yes, but in my mind, it belongs to Exeter. It belongs to the like the prophecy or the visible sign of the coming event, or the mini version of the Sunday law.
So if we look at your line, like just there, you have 2021 Exeter already.
Mm-hmm.
So you place another Exeter in between 2021 and 2025, right?
Yeah, I would, in the line of the institution, I think I'm not sure if we can place another Exeter, because 2021 is the Exeter. But we have, of course, we have Waymark in between, which is the 273. So we have also in between some little or two or one little Waymark. I cannot explain this yet. But in my next study, when I talk about Islam, I will place it also on the structure of Boston, Concord, Exeter. And there I definitely see an Exeter in between, in the fractal line from 2021 to 2025. Maybe it will get clearer then after the next presentation.
Okay, yes, certainly.
But for to make clear for the ship, Exeter is 2021.
Okay. Okay, sounds
good.
good.
And you mentioned Pedro's study, and I think this study also really should be investigated again, because an important part from my study is based on his study. And I think he was right when he said before the election that Harris would win, but Trump will be certified. So I really think that this was a correct prediction, as I understand it, and we should look into this again.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. I don't know if anybody else has questions for Elena.
I could have a question.
Go ahead, Trevor.
Yes, please.
You had a map there with the east wind and south wind, and I would just like you to kind of define what the south wind is and where it, I mean, how it's blowing upon whatever party it's blowing upon, if that makes sense.
The south wind is just, as Elder Tess explained it, or as also the story of Acts 27 says, it is favorable for the ship. So when the ship is the institution of the USA, the south wind is something that is good for the USA in their power, in their rise to power. So in 1989, the fall of the Soviet Union was good, because then the USA was the only remaining superpower. So it was good for their power. And in 2021, it was the same, because in between the Russia, the king of the South, was rising again. And the USA was not the only superpower anymore. But in 2021, Russia began to fall, and we see that the USA is rising again to be the only superpower. So it is again favorable for the institution of the USA.
And we're talking 2021 being like when they were losing a lot of those spheres of influence?
Yes. And when
here
the study of Aryan comes into play, which he's explaining the story of of the king of the north versus the king of the south in this dispensation.
I'm sorry. Am I the only one?
Yeah, I cannot explain it. 21 is the beginning of the fall.
Can you repeat
Can you
a little
still
bit,
hear me?
Elena? Can you repeat? I think it was lagging a little bit, so we didn't hear
Okay.
the whole
Okay, sorry.
everything you said.
Okay, yeah, I was just saying that regarding the fall of the King of the South in 2021, I think the study of Aryan, which he is sharing now, is helpful because he explains how he sees the fall in 2021 of Russia.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have question for Elena?
Katja, yes, I have one related to what Katja was saying, Elena. The election being, pardon me, being corrupt. Two thoughts on that. Isn't the very thought of, believing, maintaining that the election was fraudulent, feeding the very idea that democracy doesn't work, that you can't trust anything, et cetera, which certainly has become more prevalent just generally within the populace of places even beyond the United States. But do you understand? Did I word it all right? Do you understand?
Yeah, I think this is exactly what the Republicans tried to do all these years. They wanted to say that you cannot trust the elections. And so they wanted to discredit the democratic processes. And this is also what these organizations, which I have shown, are saying. They say we have to trust the elections, and therefore we are doing all these investigations that people know. We see what happens in the background, and we call for investigation, that again the people can trust again in their elections. But just to say that the election is free and fair, you can trust in the election when you in reality you cannot, would just not be true. It would be spreading a lie. And we know of the just in case the computer counting system and the software and all of this, just if this would have been everything correct, we still have the voter suppression. And this is just fact. It is no conspiracy. It is just history since all these years, since Jim Crow. And it got worse and worse in the last years. So yeah, it is just fact.
And I certainly agree. I mean, sowing doubt is one of the best strategies, right? And I remember
Yeah.
Elder Parminder with his one study where he took us through the various elections and so on. And basically, the Republicans, quote unquote, wouldn't have won.
Yeah.
But coming back to the point Katja was making with one of her questions, in terms of, the fulfilling of prophecy, Pharaoh of Egypt was the correct Pharaoh to be on the throne at a certain time. Nebuchadnezzar was the correct ruler in Babylon at a certain time. How do you mesh it with Trump needed to be the specific ruler at this point in history so that prophecy could be fulfilled?
Yeah, I think Trump needed to be the ruler, and he is. So prophecy was fulfilled with this election outcome, or with the, yeah, not as I said, not the majority wanted him, but he was certified as president, and with this prophecy had been fulfilled in my mind.
And that comes to the last point, the latter point that you were making in terms of a woman, Kamala Harris in this case, could have been Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election, but would never win not because the majority didn't want a woman, but because the system is corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
That was your point. Okay.
That's
Thank you,
how I
Elena, very
understand
much.
it.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, excellent. Thank you so much.
Any other question?
Yeah, I just want to ask the third war. Like we all know that 2001 was the second war, and those years back we preached that like 2001 was the beginning of the judgment of the living. And I don't know, like third war, is it going to be the same? Like, is it going to be the judgment, or is it going to be Michael is going to stand up? Because we all know that Christ was entering to the most glorious land, most glorious holy place. Let me say it like that. So, and how are you going to actually separate that from? Because we know that 2001 was the judgment of the living, and if the third war is going to fall again, so is it going to be the judgment of those who are going to take the mark of the beast, or how are you going to? Because in my mind, I can maybe say that like is going to be the close of probation. Michael is going to stand up if the third war is going to happen at our time. So I don't know for you.
I think that Michael will stand up here at the close of probation at this waymark here, and not here at this waymark. So I think when we see here the third woe again, it is not yet the dead of the King of the North. It is just another hurting. It's like 2001. It's hurting, but not killing. And at the Sunday law, it will be again a hurting, a judgment for the institution, but it is not yet Michael standing up. It is not yet the final end. This comes here. So yeah, maybe I can add that 2001, it was the confirmation of the first angel's message. So the event of 9/11 confirmed the first angel, and it was also an arrival of the second and third angel. And at the Sunday law waymark here, we know that the second and third angel will be confirmed. So there must be something, there must happen some event, as in 2001, that will confirm the second and third angel's message, and give power to it, and then it can swell to a loud cry. And also with the judgment, this goes hand in hand with the angel's messages. So at 2001, the third angel begins, but is not yet confirmed. And at the Sunday law, which I would mark in 2025, the third angel is confirmed through an event.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you Do you
Oh, wait.
believe, Elena, that that event would have something to do with Islam?
Yes, and that's we will discuss this in my next study.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. I think you can close with prayer so that we are not too much over time. And then we'll take a little break until your next presentation.
Okay, let's pray. Dear God, thank you that we had the possibility to study your word. I ask you that we all get clarity on our questions. I know that we have different views on the Sunday law waymark. I hope we will get unity. I hope we will find a way how to bring all those different studies together. Please be with us in this remaining Sabbath day. In Jesus' name we thank you. Amen.